I'm Master Saturn. Thank you for joining me for another BDSM United podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about traditions and innovations. As we kind of wrapped up our summer BDSM summer school series, we didn't really get on the podcast into a lot of things about relationships. And I was hoping to get more into it, but I really wanted to, or felt the draw to step back for a moment and kind of evaluate where we were at and what my personal knowledge of relationships was about things that I had a tried and true kind of knowledge about with DS, DDLG, MS, those types of things. And I was trying to kind of figure out what kinds of things are good with tradition, what kinds of things are good with innovation. And I was really just trying to express something, but I wasn't really doing what I wanted to express justice. And then I was reading a book in my magical library called The Celtic Golden Dawn by John Michael Greer. And he really touched on it, of course, given from a magic context, but he touched on what I was trying to point out within BDSM and within just I was looking at what me and my submissives relationship dynamic was like, and I was seeing that it wasn't exactly traditional, but we are a traditional resource. And what does it mean to be traditional? And can you truly be as traditional as you want to be, given that you don't live in the same time as the traditions were made? And so, what part does innovation play? And how do you innovate without being disrespectful or without dishonoring the traditions, because the traditions have value and or they, at least they have for us, and so we hold some value in tradition, but then we also want to hold some value in innovation. And how do we find our way somewhere in between? And that's kind of where I was wanting to look at today. So let me quote from the book. John Michael Greer goes on to say this: a tradition. The word comes from a Latin root that means that which is given across, or as we would now say, handed down. It's simply a collection accumulated over time of things that work. In magic, or in our case, BDSM, as in anything else, having a good idea of what has been tried in the past is an enormous asset, but it has to be combined with a willingness to adapt the lessons of the past to the needs of the ever changing present. A body of knowledge that remains absolutely fixed over time and capable of absorbing new lessons and new insights. It's not a tradition, but we call that a corpse. It's a dead thing. In the same way, the refusal to learn from the lessons of the past, far from being a sign of originality or what have you, simply guarantees that a great many mistakes made long ago will have to be made again. Those who refuse to learn from the past, as the saying goes, are condemned to repeat it. And as Karl Marx pointed out a long time ago, while the first time around may be tragedy, the second is generally farce. Greer goes on to say this: nor is it ever possible either to follow or to reject tradition totally. That's a really good point there. Let me repeat that. Is it ever possible either? No, it isn't. Nor is it ever possible either to follow or to reject tradition totally. You can't follow tradition totally, nor can you totally reject it. No matter how rigidly traditionalist someone thinks he is, he inevitably reinterprets the teachings and rituals he received in light of his own experience of life and responds to the blanks that are always left by a system of teaching by filling them with material that, consciously or otherwise, is invented for the purpose. The older the tradition, the more comprehensive the innovations will be, since, for example, no American in the 21st century is even remotely capable of experiencing the world in the same way as someone who lived in the 1940s, 50s, or 60s, in our case with BDSM. No matter how cutting edge or avant garde that BDSM player thinks she is, in the same way, the very concept of magic itself, or the very concept of BDSM itself in contemporary society, to say nothing of the fashionable philosophies and what pop culture provides, today's avant-garde magic or avant-garde, today's BDSM, with so much of its raw material are freighted with so much existing material that it's no wonder cutting edge things generally end up looking very much like old fashioned things, like the old fashioned things they claim to be rejecting. So the most successful traditions are generally those that combine a solid awareness of tradition with a willingness to innovate freely, using tradition as a base. And we want to put a little qualifying thing in there. So while we have a willingness to innovate freely, we want to do so in ways that aren't disconnected from the tradition, ways that don't dishonor, ways that don't disrespect the tradition. In other words, we don't want to totally redefine everything. We don't want to take something like submissive, the word submissive, the identity of submissive, and the identity in the word dominant. We don't want to switch those around and make make the thing that we see as submissive today mean what a dominant meant in the past, or vice versa. So we don't want to totally redefine the structures that we have. We don't want to totally redefine the identities that we have. So while we're innovating, we want to use the pieces of tradition, the pieces of the structure that exist, in order to come up with what we do. So that's kind of where it leaves us, because our my submissive and I's relationship dynamic is very much a hybrid. It doesn't look exactly, our specific dynamic doesn't look exactly like something that would be DS. It doesn't look exactly like something that would be DDLG, because there's there's things that are very uh, prevalent in DDLG that do not exist within our dynamic. And then our dynamic as well isn't quite MS, even though there are structures in place within our dynamic that are uh, leaning more towards MS. And so we find ourselves in a awkward place several years into our relationship dynamic. So this isn't something that we have just started and we're just trying to figure ourselves out. We're established BDSM practitioners, established educators, and we find what works for us specifically, while it doesn't disrespect or doesn't dishonor tradition, it isn't really traditional. And while it has innovation built within it, it is more traditional than it is next gen. And we don't really want to really go, you know, next generation, but we want to. I'm really finding that we're beginning to be a traditional voice for, or we're needing to be a traditional voice for next generation BDSM. The reason I say that is that in a lot of ways, I've always kind of argued that once you take the toothpaste out of the tube, you just can't, not easily and not without a lot of deconstruction, put the toothpaste back in the tube. So you just really, once the toothpaste is out, you can't put it back in the tube. And so some of the things that are innovations of today, while you can say, well, that's not traditional, and well, that's fine. And there are certainly some things that have run amok, but it's impossible to go back to the 40s. It's impossible to go back to the 1950s. It's impossible to go back to the 1960s or 70s or the 80s. In our age, we have things like the internet, which has radically changed everything. And so we have access to information just very easily. I can go on Amazon, and with a few seconds, I can purchase, download, and have complete access to a book that is, that I, without having to go to a library and check something out, or go to a store, or travel to a store that has one in stock, or contact the publisher and wait weeks for my check to get there in the mail, and weeks for them to return it with a book in the mail. So we aren't in the age of snail mail. We can get things very easily, and that also allows us, because we have that access to getting things easily, we can change the channel a lot quicker. We're not stuck with one resource that this is the only resource we had access to, the only resource that we have, and there are no new resources available, and so we have to just kind of stick with what we have. And we don't have just one book on BDSM. We may have 20 that we have access to, or 2 or 10, or any number. And when we're educating people that also have access to 2, 3, 4, 10 different books. They can get on Kindle as fast as we're teaching, and or they can get on Amazon as fast as we're teaching, and download a book to their phone that says, that reinforces or totally says the opposite of what we're teaching. And so we have to deal with a lot more material than we ever had in the past. So we can't go back and live in the past. So how do we do innovation? Well, we can't do innovation, or we can, but it's we can do innovation however we want, honestly. We choose to do it where we look at the tradition, and we try not to make the mistakes that they make. And we also try to use the things that the tools that they already figured out, so that we don't have to figure out something new. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's really it cuts down on the amount of time that it takes us to that we can be spending on building our relationship, for instance, instead of trying to figure out how to build a relationship. We can take the tried and true things, the things that others have practiced, and we can innovate them and change them and adapt them without disrespecting them, and apply them to us. So where do we find ourselves, my submissive and I? Well, you can go to see our blog, or our our new website. It's www.mastersaturn.com, where we are beginning to unfold and unpack some of the uh, some of what our relationship is in a way that we don't have to be censored anymore, because we're really censored by social media. There's lots of rules, and we're really too taboo for Instagram or Facebook or any of the meta platforms where we can post graphic things if we wanted to on Twitter, but they'll be marked a certain sensitivity. And then you can only use a certain number of characters, so you really can't get much more than a paragraph. Which, if you want to explain what's in the video or explain what's in the image that you have, you don't have very much space to do so. You can't really use Tumblr anymore. They don't allow what they used to allow, and they just don't allow a lot of freedom. So we created our own page. We found an adult hosting company based in Amsterdam, Netherlands, and they have some of the best customer service. If you're visiting mastersaturn.com, look in the sidebar, and you'll see an advertisement for Vice Temple. Please use that link. It's an affiliate link. It helps us out, and it gives them more business because they really deserve it. They're providing a very essential service uh, to people like us that want to not be censored, that feel that a lot of the things that we are interested in should be somewhat normative in society. Of course, they're not for minors, but among adults, they should be normative. They should be able to be expressed. And we're tired of the censorship. So, so you can check out that, but really we find ourselves, you'll see right at the top of our page that it's the home of Master Saturn in Little Libra, because we find ourselves in a master slash little relationship dynamic. Yeah, you heard that right. A master slash little relationship dynamic, because I tried to use the word slave with her and she was accepting of it, but it just didn't feel right to me because it didn't feel like who she was. And while she's very, very submissive, she's always very good. She's always looking to do everything so that in her life that so that it is uh, respectable, and that it doesn't dishonor my name as her dominant. It doesn't disrespect me as a person or as her dominant. She's always looking for ways to live her life in such a way that pleases me and is pleasing and beneficial to our relationship dynamic. And so we find ourselves at this master little hybrid, and we don't really see examples of it in tradition. We may see some examples in innovation. There may be, I'm sure there's other people that feel like have innovated this, but we'll keep going in this series because I want to talk more about tradition versus innovation, and I want to talk about what makes what we draw from when we're creating relationship dynamics. What is the key to a relationship dynamic, drawing from tradition, but also, um, what types of innovations are allowable or beneficial to a to us as people living in the time and the season that we are today, given that we can't go back and we have to look forward. And so how are we going to move forward? I'm Master Saturn. Thank you for joining me for this BDSM United podcast. And just kind of dropped the ball, I guess, on some of our more traditional people that are like, what? That doesn't exist. That's blasphemy. Well, I've been guilty of blasphemy number of times. So, we'll just put you, just stand in line for the gods, goddesses, and people that I have blasphemed in my life. So take a number, bring your lunch, stand in line. We're gonna be here a while. I'm Master Saturn. You can find all of our resources at www.bdsmunited.com. Be sure to check out mastersaturn.com. That's a really good new resource, and it's been a lot of fun. And that's between working a lot, working like 6 days a week, numerous hours, not having a lot of time off, and dealing with some seasonal sicknesses and things of that nature, and then also at the same time building this new work of mastersaturn.com and continuing to work on the concepts of the book that I've been writing. That's where I've been instead of podcasting. But you have a new episode today, and we have some new direction, something that I'm passionate about, that I want to get behind a microphone and express to you. It's been a joy speaking with you today, and I'll talk with you again soon.